My name is Emily. I was born in Downey, California to George and Sarah Hibbard. Dad met Mom at a gas station when she was only 19. 3 years later, on the 4th of July, 1976, our nation's 200th anniversary, those hippies married each other under an oak tree at a friend's house in Valley Center, California.
There are times and there are trials, living in my own denial. There are ups and there are downs. Sometimes for fools I wear the crown.
For years, Dad's been talking about Canada's notorious Dempster Highway. It's considered some sort of miracle if you don't get a flat tire or cross the river ferries without waiting in line for days. Well, the Inuvik-Tuktoyaktuk Highway was recently completed, making it possible for thrill seekers to drive right on up to the shores of the Arctic Ocean. This only fueled Dad's fire. He dreamed of taking his Expedition Land Cruiser, built by Chris Wren of Tecate, California, and driving 3,500 miles north, at which time, of course, he wanted to take his favorite kayak for a paddle in the Arctic Ocean. He somehow convinced Mom this would be an adventure of a lifetime. And off they went.
Father, I can count on you to carry me and take me high.
One day last year, I found myself thinking about my dad, feeling grateful for the childhood he allowed me to have. My mind wandered a bit, and I began to think about Dennis Lamar.
Try again.
He's creating a beautiful home for his kids, too. So was Michael Wynn.
How you guys doing, okay?
So was Edmund Davila. And Richard Bravo. Then on and on and on the list continued.
Where can I go where you won't be there too?
I didn't post a casting call asking people to refer me to men they think are really great dads. I didn't have to. I already knew who they were.
I told you, you are a healer.
I set out on this journey to give these men a voice. I asked them why being a father was so important. I wanted to hear, in their words and in their own way, just what is so meaningful about fatherhood.
I'm proud to say I wanna be like my father in so many ways.
When I was growing up, Dad worked with Grandpa at the family business. Mom devoted her life to raising us girls. Together, my parents created a stable, safe, and loving place I called home.
It's cold though.
Dads are to the family as the skeleton is to the body. They have this innate ability to keep things in order and working right.
When it comes to fatherhood today, I think that the single most important thing you can do is just be aware of what's going on in your kid's life. I think too many people get caught up with their career, they get caught up in their marriage relationship, they get caught up in church or business or any number of things, and they simply lose touch with their children. And I see it so often. It's like one day you're their kid's best friend, one day this is a creature you don't even know.
Hey, Papa, you want to come back a little close here?
We are all wired kind of to do what we want to do. We're all narcissistic. But when you are relied on by other people, it fundamentally has to change you.
The approval of a dad, I learned that early on. It's different from when it comes from a mom. Because moms are just naturally, whether they do good or bad, and they're just loving.
My wife has so many friends, and tons of them are single moms. And it breaks my heart. It's just super hard to raise a kid with both parents, let alone with just one. And how is a mom to be a mom and a dad? They need the things that come from both a mother and a father.
My dad, he's a passionate man. He's a great man. He grew up without a father, and that was very defining for him or for anybody. His parents were divorced when he was 8, and his dad died when he was 16 and had alcohol problems and all sorts of things. So that was very defining for my dad.
And we moved to California in 1963, so I was 3. Moved to Downey in 1975, right after my 9th grade year, which was really difficult. My parents had split up a few years prior, but what really helped me a lot was joining the football program. I was always an athlete, always somebody was outside, running around doing something with a ball. Little did I know that that experience was going to have a profound effect on me.
I grew up with a single-parent mother. She was always into me experimenting with different things. She played music. She loved to do salsa. She would dance. She would sing. And then I grew up around a lot of women. So my aunties were always in the house. My auntie would play Michael Jackson, Prince. So I would get exposed to art and instruments, and I would have pots and pans, and I would just play music all the time when I was a kid. So I just remember growing up so much into just being creative. I lived in my mind a lot. I was the only child.
I do remember most of the journey from Guatemala all the way to the United States. It was my older brother, he was 6, and my mom. She came here first, and she made some money and then went back for us. Long bus rides, a lot of walking. My mom was always prepared. She always knew that there was gonna be people trying to rob us. And she had like a little stash of cash just to give them here, like, here, leave us alone. Crossing the river to the United States, I remember that. It was late at night, and this guy puts us on this raft. He was about this high, and he would push us. You know, you're kids, and you're in this river, and you know, and we start splashing the water. And the guy's telling us to shut up, and we just ignore him and continue splashing, and he hits us really hard. And now he's trying to tell us to shut up, and all we're doing is crying and trying to silence 2 kids. It's almost impossible. You know, we didn't realize how dangerous it really was.
Curious what sort of dad groups are out there, I happily discovered City Dads Group had a Los Angeles chapter. And the men of the LA Dads Group were just as passionate about being actively engaged fathers as the rest of the men.
I'm the blog editor, co-organizer for the LA Dads Group. And Trevor was like, yeah, man, I got this cool dads group. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I got enough stuff to do. He's like, no, you should come out, it'll be awesome.
There's a bigger organization called City Dads, but about 4 or 5 years ago, they found me and asked if I would like to help organize and run the dads group here in LA.
I think our ultimate goal is just for dads to be more involved as parents, you know, with their kids' lives. Yeah, I mean, that's key. And it's so critical. Like, there's a lot of research that's been done that shows when fathers are engaged in parenting and bringing up their kids, particularly at a young age, that it leads to better outcomes for the kids.
I never knew my father. I just knew my father stayed 5 minutes away from me. I saw him once, and I remember he dropped off a BMX bike Christmas Eve. I was with my friend. We were just like messing around on the porch, and he pulled up in the car. He had this bike, and he just went straight to my mom. And I was looking like, what is this? Who's he? And then patted me on my head, and then he drove away.
The next big event would be the passing of my dad, 2 days before my 17th birthday. He had been an alcoholic for years, owned a bar actually in Linwood, not too far from here. So that was, you know, obviously quite traumatic, difficult, life-changing. That affected, you know, kind of how I finished high school.
though the circumstances that I grew up in, other people would say are like hard circumstances. If it wasn't just South Central LA, we moved to the jungles, and the jungles was a lot of apartments, a lot of gang violence. I grew up in the 80s. But for some reason, I don't know how my mom did it, but she maneuvered me in schools and places. I went to a majority white school. There was maybe 2 or 3 other black people there at the school. And she said enough in my mind to where I had this mindset of like, I never saw, to be honest, the negativity. I grew up that positive, optimistic, if that makes sense. And so, yeah.
At that time, it was just my mom. And she worked a lot. So, can you imagine 2, 6 and 7-year-old kids walking to and from school?
Before, it was just pretty normal, dads and sons, and, we'd play catch and do father-son things. But the sad thing is I don't have too many memories of that. I know some of it happened, but I think because of the sudden jarring of my dad leaving the home, I don't know, I think it kind of, I lost something. And post that was not many good memories at all, unfortunately. Because he'd be around when he could, every other weekend, the typical divorce dynamics that happen when parents split up. There weren't too many positives.
When I got married, I married somebody who came from a very broken home. My idea was we can make this work no matter what, but not everybody knows how to do that. And so some of the challenges that I discovered over the years raising these 4 boys is not having unity in our marriage. So often I think parents and people with egos will, try to win the argument but lose the child in the process. It's not just who's right, but it's doing what's right. Sometimes that's a hard thing to do.
I never really experienced like what I have with my son and what I hope to have with my grandsons. Yeah, I always desired it, but that was never there.
I think it's unfortunate that for a lot of people, they sort of continue that cycle, right? When they've had a rough childhood, they unfortunately, they don't know any better, and they continue that for their kids. And I credit my dad a lot because he broke the cycle.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I look so small.
I look so small.
You just had the same conversation with him, and his first 10 years of life were very different than mine. And that's because he did it right.
I didn't trip on it because I didn't know what it was like to have a dad. I did have a perspective of dad. So when I went to go visit other friends and sleep the night at friends' houses, I looked at dads as like mystical figures, like as a danger to some extent. I was waiting for a dad to do something that would be harsh. And crazy part about it is either that was in my mind and I created that reality, but majority of the times the fathers lived up to what I thought about. So, moms was always sweet, moms was good. Pops comes in the house, there's a little bit of a dominion, there's a little bit of dictatorship that I used to feel.
When it seems I'm far away, I am closer than you think. For this promise that I made is I'll be by your side. I'll be by your side.
Dad's mom immigrated to the United States from Guadalajara, Mexico, after narrowly surviving both the Mexican Revolution and the Cristero War. Grandma had a brilliant mind and secretly chronicled stories of her childhood run-in with Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa and of her Norwegian-born father hanging incandescent lamps on poles with a gentleman named Thomas Edison. Dad, I would later realize, inherited that same beautiful mind.
Well, what we've encountered as members of LA Dads Group is dads breaking those stereotypes, the perpetuated stereotypes of not being involved, not being active, and not being role models for their children and also for their families.
Various types of dads are in our group. We've got stay-at-home dads, working dads, dads that are co-parenting, or even dads that are, stepchildren, or they're stepping in as a fatherly figure, even if they're not the biological father or linked to that child biologically. So there's a great diverse group of dads.
I grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey, and my childhood was pretty interesting because my parents didn't speak any English. So I, in turn, didn't speak any English till I was about 10 or so. The tri-state area was just chock full of Italians, and I was an only child. So I was doted on. And my father, I think because of the way he grew up, they really weren't affectionate. What I do remember is that, he was an old school Italian, so he didn't show much affection.
So in my growing up, my mother was very loving, my father was very stern, not complimentary, not emotional, no touching, no hugging, nothing like that. I didn't hear the words, "I love you," from my father till I was probably in my late 20s. And that was prompted by me saying that to him, and him beginning to understand there's more to life than just being the taskmaster.
Dad's dad grew up in Dancy, Wisconsin, and served as a U.S. Marine in the South Pacific during World War II. After the war, he traded Wisconsin winters for sunny Southern California and started a manufacturing company called Spiral Paper Tube and Core in 1949. Grandpa was a man of action and few words. Dad, I would later discover, didn't fall far from the tree.
My dad was pretty nonverbal. He didn't really communicate with language, spoken language. But he was a great dad, as far as I'm concerned, because he was, first of all, he was always there. The other thing that I got from him was the fact that he loved us by the way that he worked. That he would go to a job every single day out in the oil fields in Bakersfield summers and 115 degrees. He was doing to provide for his family the very best.
As I got older and started to see life from becoming a young man and then a man, I started to really appreciate my father even more. And that's when I was like, man, yeah, he's a rock. Like, he's the truth, and that's when it started to get better in terms of me, like, wow, I want to be like him.
I have friends they and their father were like best friends. That was not the story of my father and I. We were never best friends. When I was growing up, we did family vacations, we did all that stuff, but we just never really were terribly close. And I think that's fairly common of people of my generation.
Dad was born in Compton, California during the summer of 1950 and is, by all definitions, a baby boomer. Straight out of Compton, Dad was most comfortable expressing his love by providing and fixing. When the sink was clogged, he was the plumber. When I couldn't get the lid off the pickle jar, he was the muscle. When I needed to sharpen my number 2 pencil but had lost my sharpener, he'd unclip the knife from his hip pocket and in 4 quick movements and yellow shavings flying into the air and hand me back his version of a sharpened pencil. It looked odd, but it worked.
Life is a journey that I'll hold your hand through. Every bump that you cross, I'll be right next to you. Your anchor through the waves.
As it turns out, an entire generation of baby boomer dads were also quietly providing and fixing.
There are memories I have of us doing a lot of fishing and things like that, but I do remember him working a lot. He constantly made it a point to make a better life for us. So that's why he went to California, because he knew there wasn't much in the little city of Longview for us. So he worked a lot. He was very driven. I mean, he barely knows English. We communicate, but he speaks English, but you can obviously tell it's a second language. So the fact that he was able to move to California and get his contractor's license is pretty amazing to me. And then when we got here, like I said, he was constantly working a lot. But he'd be home every night. My mom would always cook, and we'd always have dinner as a family. So he's a simple man, loves good food, and I think that's where I get it from, because I consider myself a foodie. He's not a man of many words, you know, but he's a strong man.
Dad was busting it. The epitome of this is how you take care of your family. Like whatever it takes.
Let me just go to the one, all those, and then let me get some ad-libs on those.
He had a kind of more, what some people call a more blue-collar, traditional baby boomer kind of thing. Mom, like, hustled all this stuff like a superwoman, you know, made sure everything was ready. He got to come home after a hard day's work and kind of chill. I was thinking about just how steady he had been. And I mean, that was what I saw growing up. And so anybody's fortunate to get to see something like that. Just diagnosed him with autism, that was this year. So we have 3 kids. All 3 kids are in diapers right now. There was a certain amount of developmental regression that starts happening, and you're like, what happened? What's going on? But there's grace for it. The fun stuff outweighs everything else, you know. I know I'm fortunate on multiple levels.
The brightest of futures, or the worst we can picture, become a prophecy. Should it be simple?
My dad was a Mr. Businessman. He's got a lot going on all the time. He would always, you know, try to be home from work by 4:30 so that he could spend time with us, do homework with us, coach our teams. My mom was the prototypical soccer mom, like she, you know, I mean, I didn't play soccer. I tried, it was bad. My relationship with my dad was always really great. We were really close. He didn't have a great relationship with his dad. His dad really looked at kids as functional. Like, you have kids so that you have somebody to get the work around the house done. And my dad sort of made a very conscious decision to go the complete opposite direction.
Simple to be you, simple to be me.
As a woman, I curiously asked the men to share about masculinity.
Generationally, my father grew up in an era where that's what you did. My grandfather grew up in an era, that's how you fathered your children. You know, you were masculine, you were, you know, just straightforward, aggressive.
Do story time, come on.
You were the breadwinner in the household. Your mother was the homemaker.
Where's Ellie hiding? It was all good.
I can honestly say I don't even think he's ever said I love you in my entire life. It's just culturally, you know, he came from Vietnam, you know, during the war. He's the oldest. He was like the strongest in his family. Everybody looks up to him. But yeah, we never had any like deep talks or anything like that, you know. But all my siblings and I had a healthy fear of him because he was very strict.
Yeah, that dynamic was definitely in play where he showed his love via providing. That was his way of saying I love you, and you know, by taking care of me, us. Fortunately, my mom was so loving that I took after her a great deal.
My dad was not, you know, the macho man that could fix anything. My dad can't fix a damn thing. My mom could do that. She was more just that, and I'm the same way. I'm a little better than him, but certainly the way you show emotion, right? My dad was a guy who we're Mediterranean, we're Greek. We're like, if we're pissed, we're not gonna like bite our bottom lip and not, you're gonna know about it. As a matter of fact, everybody in the building's gonna know about it. That for me was masculine. And growing up, I was much more that way. And I've probably being married, and I kind of tone you down a little bit. And I've toned down a lot over the years, but certainly that was a part of it.
My grandfather actually got run off the road when his wife and daughter, my mother, were in the car by somebody who was, not paying attention and drove down the center of the road. So he pulled off in the ditch. Well, he unhooked the house trailer, left my mom and my grandmother there, and got in his car, chased the guy down, and pulled him over just like he had been a policeman, and made the guy come back and apologize. Which I have always thought was there, didn't beat him up, didn't go after him he might have gotten in a fight if it had been called for, but the point of it was that was very not only dangerous but disrespectful, and he was going to make sure the guy went back and properly dealt with it, made him go back and apologize.
Growing up in the rap era, I was never really into objectifying women. When I think about it, it's like the media tells you that men have to be a certain way.
It was a different world back then, but my first real encounter was I had two best friends, Wendy and Rusty. Rusty was about 3 years older, so he could go into Eckerd's drugstore and buy Playboy magazines. He was still not old enough, but they let him buy them. And we literally built a hideout way down in the woods out of stolen real estate signs and wallpapered it with centerfolds from Playboy magazines. I'm like 12 years old. And of course, Playboy then is almost nothing compared to what pornography is today.
Knowing that my sons are growing up in an era where not only is it accessible to you on the internet, you can just pull up your phone.
I'm a sexual assault detective with the Anaheim Police Department, so a lot of our job deals with, contacting the suspects and getting them to confess to these things, which they do.
You have enough people lined up?
No. A lot of people ask me, how do you do this? How do you deal with these crimes where knowing that these children are being molested, and you talk to these guys who are doing these things? For me, I always answer this. I don't think about the acts themselves because they're obviously very horrific. I think about the victims and getting justice for them. I really do, because I know that it's just part of the healing process, and I love being able to do that.
Detective Wynn. For me, the things that sort of shape that a little bit more would be the more subtle things of whether it's a magazine cover or a music video or things like that, of how women were sort of given their validity through how they look, and men were given their validation by the look of the girl on their arm.
Especially in the Latinos, it's like, oh, that's not manly, machismo, this and that. It's, it's cliche, but it's true. I remember when I was little, they're like, oh, how many girlfriends does your son have? Oh, he has 3, this kind of talk. You have to do away with that. Talk to my boys. No 3, no, there's only 1. The way you treat your girlfriend is the way you're gonna treat your wife.
All right, I'm looking forward to meeting you. Thanks.
It's not for everybody, for sure, especially when you're dealing with children and victims of rape and things like that. So, and then how I get away with it is I play golf. I play golf on Fridays to, kind of release myself. I get outside, walk around, and that's what I do. But then, being with my family, I definitely try not to take work home.
Knowing that I can provide and protect, do the things that I believe that I've been taught that a man does, it doesn't have to be at the forefront of everything I do. I don't have to be harsh. I don't have to be mean. I don't have to be that macho man. I know who I am, and I'm comfortable with that. I know my strengths, and I also know my weaknesses that I can learn from anybody, my children included. But I don't buy into the superhero movie type of masculinity.
To know you was made for this.
Top shelf guys like Matt Barnes just seem to fill my life.
Don't look at the camera. Don't look at the camera. If you look at the camera, then you can try.
He and both my sisters studied at Pepperdine University together, and he's been in my life ever since. So naturally, I had to ask him and the other dads to describe what it was like becoming a father for the first time.
Born for this, I was made for you.
The moment that was real, just for a moment, was when they were handed to me for the first time, and I just lost it.
What? It changed every aspect of life for me.
It was life-changing. You don't think you could love something so much until you have a child. Like, I love my wife, right? But then when you have this little human being right in front of you, like, it teaches you to even love even more, right? It's like a new, different level of love, you know, that you had never experienced before.
I was no longer number one. I remember when my oldest son, Larry, was about to be born. I don't know what happens, and I'm not sure that it happens to all men, but when I found out that she was pregnant, and then when I found out she was going to have a son, things started to change inside of me.
Oh man, becoming a dad for the first time, I didn't know it was going to be so emotional. I cried. I really cried.
My wife's only 4'11". I mean, she almost had a 9-pound baby, you know, naturally. And just seeing how big he was, and I fell in love with him, you know, at first sight. It was crazy.
That first moment, yeah, it was crazy. That was weird. Because you just feel all the emotions at the same time.
I wanted to fix the whole world immediately. I was like, this world has to be better if my daughter's gonna be raised in this world. So it made me want to just do more things in my community, do more things around me. This kind of set the scene for her so she can have a beautiful life.
I can't even really explain it in a coherent way. But it was life-changing.
Just the awesomeness, like it was awesome to just have this little human being that I knew I was going to be in charge of. It was the greatest overwhelming feeling.
I have a granddaughter.
Now they're like young adults, and just being there for them in completely different way. It's just a whole new way to experience him.
There's not much in life that can clarify what is really important than something like that, than that experience. My life meant nothing. You know, my life, it wasn't about me anymore. And I believe fatherhood is that.
The moment that I held my daughter in my arms, I don't know what I'd signed up for. But I just show up, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm here, you know, and I work on myself to bring the best version of myself to my daughter.
We actually struggled to become parents. And I remember going to a fertility expert, and it was interesting that I had to write him a huge check. And looking back, the night after I wrote him that huge check, she got pregnant. I think the realization that we were going to have to start writing big checks to a fertility expert for treatments, maybe that straightened us out. I don't know what it was.
Is that amazing?
I confess to having said to Bodie before Rachel got here, you know, how's this going to, you know, work? We haven't been married that long, you know, and so on. And she said, it'll be different, but it'll be great. And she was right.
Having children impacted how these men saw themselves. It even affected how they viewed the world.
I think that definitely as men, right, we're taught like be tough, don't cry, all those types of things. And one of the interesting things about our world today is that's sort of all being redefined.
Abandoned youth was always my passion. And I don't know, I can't tell you why. It wasn't like I was abandoned, you know what I mean? But I guess I had abandonment issues because my father wasn't around. So that's probably the core of it all. I had negative feelings towards being able to say those words, like father. And so I really wanted to explore why am I tripping off of that? And my desire was to be that bridge for a lot of people. 10 years ago, me and my wife created something called Slingshot Media. And Slingshot was based off the David and Goliath story, meaning who you are is enough to overcome any giant in your life. And so we would go to group homes, prisons, foster care agencies. What we did creatively, we would bring that to the youth.
One of the hardest things ever is raising them, because they require so much supervision at this stage, and then with the challenges. Oh, hi, baby.
And we said we were going to have a baby in 5 years. The process of getting pregnant was hard, actually. Just even doctor-wise, they were saying that there was something maybe wrong with V being able to get pregnant. So we used to hear that, and we would never accept it. Again, we were very intentional of how we were going to do this. We were loose enough to where we weren't going to trip if something happened, but we said we wanted to have fun and like party, and we had a business together too, so we wanted to see that out. When it hit, it was the 5th year, so literally our anniversary just passed 2 months, and just like that, Clay Lee came right on in at the right time.
I actually ended up getting married at, I think, 34. Because the reality of the matter is, when you find someone special, it's so neat. I mean, there's nothing like marriage. You say what you want, and it is work. But it's really neat. It's neat to have someone to share a life with, and then especially when you start having kids, it's unbelievable, really. So you wouldn't believe who I used to be and who I am now. It's just night and day in 2 different lives, 2 different people.
When the twins were born, it was so surreal. I, as a guy who was, is almost 40, lived so many years being like, those people are the dads. It's still something I'm learning. They're mine. Like, I know cognitively, obviously, but that feeling of like, oh, I'm dad. That's me now. These are my kids. I did that, you know?
Welcome back. Thank you. Good to see you.
I'm really hoping that once they can, daddy, and that kind of thing, and that that's when it'll click. And fortunately, I've talked to a lot of guys who have experienced similar things, They're like, when did it hit you that you're a dad? And they're like, well, when my kid turned 6. And I'm like, oh, okay, good.
When we had our first, we had Vito. And, when you're a dad, I think the first thing I did was make sure he's got, 10 fingers and 10 toes. I did the 10-10 check. So we're good. And you realize that it is the greatest lesson in love. When I looked at my son Vito, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if you could love anything more. I don't know if you could love anything more. Just.
It was like a pure restoration. It was like the greatest comeback story. Fatherhood was like I got a chance to see legacy.
What I really love is that dads are becoming part of the conversation. Like if this was a couple years ago, this would have just been MommyCon, there wouldn't have been a DaddyCon. So it's really exciting that there is a DaddyCon, and that there's a Daddy Lounge, and that there's a recognition that dads are here and they matter and they're important to their kids.
Parenting is already a lot about championing your kids, but then when you add that element to it, you really have to advocate and really find out what's out there and what's available. And so, I mean, we have, but that's a everyday thing. Good, Langston. Yeah, Papa. Oh, come on, Papa. Swing your leg. You gotta swing your leg. It's nonstop. You already have that. It's built in as a parent and as a dad. But then you take any of the additional issues, you gotta up your game. It's a job within itself.
It has to be modeled. If you don't see it in wherever you get your notion of how men and women are supposed to relate, if that doesn't happen in your home and it doesn't happen in television, it doesn't happen in movies, what are you going to base it on?
Man, masculinity's changed since I had a daughter. Masculinity to me was like all the conflicts, you have to meet them head on and fight them with, you know, just aggression and, you know. And then when I had my daughter, it completely changed.
I thought you did it like this. Did you put it up like this and then you did the ballet?
I opened the door for Bodhi. That, to me, is just common courtesy. But I realize it's not, you know, much in the world today, and so I would love to see that get reintroduced. It requires such a tiny bit of effort to say by that action, I value you. And that's really what you're communicating.
You know, I coach football. One of our things I like to say is to lead from the front. And when things get difficult, that you don't run, that you step up and you take care of it.
Those heels on the white line, stay focused. We got to set the tone on a Monday.
You know, the guys have to do the right thing. If you're in, you're in. You have a child, push all your chips in. Otherwise, you know, keep the puppy in the doghouse and don't have kids.
And to me, for a man, masculinity is figuring out who am I as a guy, who am I, and, you know, being that person. Going, okay, now I'm gonna live that life and I'm gonna confidently say, I'm this person, I'm good at these things, I wanna be about this, these are my values, let's go.
So if there's a problem in your marriage, that you don't just go to the bar and get drunk and keep it all down, or you don't say it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. No, work that out.
Ball up, consistent.
Step up and take care of it, right? If there's a problem with one of the kids, that you don't just stand there on your phone or, you know, sorry, I'm gonna go golfing or fishing or whatever it is you like to do. No, there's an issue, you need to take care of it.
Knowing how to be softer, knowing how to be gentle, knowing when to be firm, you know, and understanding the dynamic between the two. It's very important, you know, in raising a child, especially a daughter, and dealing with my wife. And this is why my father inspired me, because he was such a macho man, but he had his soft moments. And when I look at that now, I'm like, wow, that's what Dad did. That's what Pop did.
Now I feel like all I'm doing is living out legacy. It's huge to me. I'm not afraid of fatherhood.
The men in this documentary are redefining and reclaiming masculinity. Modern fatherhood is understanding when to be gentle and when to be firm, expressing affection and acknowledging faults.
A stranger to the world, afraid of things to come, but he who runs was where it all began.
The coolest thing though about it, which is a real blessing, is having my wife having me. I can't even imagine raising 3 kids with just one parent. Oh, there you are. There you are. But it's worth it.
I consider myself a feminist in the sense that the more that we can get dads respect as parents and as caregivers and as co-partners in this process of raising kids, the better it is for moms. Being a parent is really difficult and really stressful, and we put too much of a burden on moms to do everything, and you know, and as dads, like, we just get treated as like, oh my God, you're changing your kid's diaper, you're the dad of the year. No, that's like our job. That's what we should be doing. We should be engaged with being parents, and that's better for the kids, better for our partner, better for us. It's just all around better for society.
My first marriage, we had my daughter Ariel and my son Brandon. And this is my second marriage. She has one who's turning 22 tomorrow. Then she has a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. It is going to be a blended family, so there's some concerns about just where certain boundaries are. I would never look to replace your dad, but be a male role model, and understanding where that balance and where that line should be drawn in each different scenario. You know, I don't know what that looks like yet, so that part makes me a little nervous sometimes.
Similarity to how they were all raised, to this extent that you teach boys how girls should be treated, and you teach girls how they should expect to be treated. How is a man supposed to behave? How are you supposed to be honored? And girls have to be taught that, just like the guys have to be shown this is how to do it.
Since I didn't have that father where he showed affection, that was a learning curve for me. I had to learn that. I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that these kids know that they're loved. So, but how does that look? Edwin could care less if I tell him at school, I love you, mijo, and then he'd be like, love you too, Dad. Johnny, yeah, I know that he was a little bit more sensitive toward that because, Dad, you're embarrassing me. I would too if I was his age. So I told him, all right, when you get off the truck and I do this, that means I love you, but you got to do it back. And he's like, okay, that we can do. And you have to mix it up with your kids because they're all different. You can't treat every single child the same.
This was a lot of work. You guys are so special to us. We just want to make sure that you could all sit in the same area, be in the same area to enjoy a meal with us.
Crying's good, getting it out, dealing with your own stuff, therapy, all that's powerful. Do it, get it out. I'm not saying it's like the placebo that's gonna cure you overnight, but I held it in for a long time. But once I was able to get it out and talk to people and cry, you have to empty yourself of all that stuff. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's other people that depend upon you now. It's not about you right now.
It's about this blended family, this beautiful family. I just thank you for each of our children. I thank you for beautiful. I've always lived my life as an open book with my kids. They know everything about me, age appropriate. I'm willing to share anything with my kids. So I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly and the bad stuff never comes with any sort of, bragging. It's just what not to do. I think that's really important, being real.
I think just consistency. Consistency and patting them back when they do good, holding them accountable. A loving approach with structure can reinforce their positive roles of adult males that are, trying to help them. Being at a Catholic school in San Bernardino, we get a lot of boys who come from broken homes, who have abuse at home. So they come to us and they're looking for all those things. They're looking for consistency, they're looking for accountability. They won't say that, but they are.
That whole myth, I don't give my kids a lot of time, but when I do, it's quality time. That's nuts. Crises don't happen on a schedule. They can't schedule for your quality time when they're going through a difficult time. Dads have to be incredibly sensitive and know when they're going through something difficult. One thing I have been born with, I think, is knowing how to read people really well. And I've always had this gift of knowing that they were going through something. And maybe it's not something they wanted to talk about, maybe it was. But the idea of just being there, being available to them, I think is the single most important thing you can possibly do.
After spending an entire summer following these California dads around, I discovered two things. First, even though these dads appear different on the outside, they're very similar on the inside. They each have a father's heart. They're strong, they're courageous, and deeply compassionate. Like my own dad, these men are embracing fatherhood as a lifelong adventure into the great unknown. Second, I never heard one excuse about anything from anybody, ever. Whatever the challenge, whatever the circumstance, these men are standing their ground. They're leading from the front.
I'll be there through the bumps in the road, 'cause perfect
Talk about a complete role reversal. Supper club closes, she gets this great job. I end up becoming Mr. Mom. So now I've got 3 kids literally a year apart. 3, 2, 1. You know, and I was always kind of this motorcycle riding, wild, macho guy, and I go from, you know, motorcycle to minivan in like 3 years. It's really quite an adjustment. It just, and then it dawned on me, I thought, you know what, every guy has to do this. Every guy needs to spend a season of his life being a stay-at-home dad to truly appreciate the role of the mom.
We've seen a doubling of the number of stay-at-home dads in the last 10 to 15 years. A lot of it was really driven by the recession, right? And it was kind of, some dub it the man session, because a lot of men were unemployed all of a sudden when it was sort of traditionally their role to be the breadwinner. And so we've actually jumped from like about 10% to about 20% of dads are stay-at-home dads.
Just through a hook of circumstances, my dad was the one who ended up staying home with the kid when my brother was born, and then later when I was born. So I actually had a stay-at-home dad and a full-time working mom throughout my childhood.
I am actually a stay-at-home dad. Our mother goes to work at 7 in the morning. She doesn't get home till 6 o'clock at night.
I think my dad's idea before my brother was born was that my brother would quietly sleep in the corner while he kept working on his research for his PhD. And, you know, infants have other plans beyond that.
At the beginning, I was super excited. I was like, I'm going to be able to play all day, and this is going to be so much fun. And it's a lot of work, you know, just maintaining the house. Chores, chasing after them, having them attached to your hip when you're trying to get things done.
You want to talk about multitasking, I was good to go. I can have a coffee and change a diaper, and if I could flip them up in the air, they'd land with the diaper on. So, and I'm walking down the street with friggin' a 3-compartment stroller. I mean, the thing was like a half a block long.
There's more dads who are at home who are looking for a connection, because, you know, being at home with your kids, as we know, can be a little isolating, really isolating. You know, you think you're all day with this human, but it's very demanding. You need kind of real adult break.
It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It got to a point where I'd rather go out, and if somebody asked me to like lay bricks, I'm there. Take the kids, I'm out of here, I gotta go lay some bricks. That would have been a vacation. Because it just sucked every ounce of your being. Physically, mentally, but it taught me a really super valuable lesson.
It's chaos. You know, the days are super long, but the years are super short. I can't believe it's been 8 years already.
I think parenting is teaching. I think parenting is coaching. It's a relational mode. As a teacher, as a coach, if they don't know that you care about them,
whenever I tell people what I do for a living, they're always, oh, you're a football coach.
Show a sense of caring, but firm and structured.
And this year is the toughest answer I have, because I say
You have to balance the two.
it's going to be an exciting year.
The same answer doesn't fit every situation. It just doesn't. You have to figure out, okay, what's the best way to approach that? And I give my kids credit, because there's times, like I said, they caught me in that, and I had to adjust it.
He's a real fiery, passionate guy. I'm the same way in a lot of ways. He was my coach a lot growing up, which was awesome, but then at times it was a huge challenge.
I'll never forget this. He was about 10, and we were coming home from a Little League baseball game, and there was a game that they had lost.
I struck out twice.
And as a coach, my mind is always about, like, okay, what could you do better? How could you improve?
You just chew me out. You want to blame me? You want to blame the umpire? You have no one to blame but yourself. And I'm like crying.
He turns to me like that. It just says, can you just be dad and not be coach? And it was like I had just gotten hit by a train. He was right. Was absolutely right. And from then on, it's been so much. I get emotional thinking about it. so much better. And not a buddy-buddy type thing, because he didn't need that then. He needed a father. But I'll never forget that.
The biggest challenge for me as a father in going through the divorce is losing touch with the other kids. I ended up with full custody of my youngest son, and he came to live with me when he was 8 years old. The hardest thing for me to do was recognize that at some point he's going to explore and discover and fail and get hurt on his own. And so while I'm holding on to him so tight to protect him, you know, I realize that I might also be denying him free will. Loving your kids is letting them go. You know, of course, praying for them and teaching them what you can, but there's a time when you got to let them go, and they're going to come back if you teach them the right way, but they got to do it on their own. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do because I fought so hard to protect him and insulate him from the challenges and from the pain and from the things that would take away his youth and his joy.
There's something also that a man brings that's just a little bit different. I would term that as falling into like leadership, you know, or partnership, I guess, however you want to look at it really, but it's being active, you know, being an active participant to the marriage. The male embodies a sort of strength. Not that the woman can't be firm, but also nurturing and that loving soft side. I just think that's the way we were created to naturally kind of bring those things to it.
I love it. Thank you, Edwin.
Got a feeling there's a hero inside me, but I can't seem to move out of my way.
My outlook is completely different than what it was then. It was a miracle. And it was only as I grew up, as I grew older, that I got to appreciate, you know, my father and accept how he expressed his love. I mean, I knew he loved me. It was hard for him to say, I love you. I mean, well, the nature of my personality is such that, you know, I wanted that. You want to hear that. Everybody wants to hear that.
My dad may have made a lot of mistakes in his life, but my mom, late in her life, had Alzheimer's. And it got really, really bad to a point where we had to put her in a lockdown facility. And my dad chose to move into that lockdown facility with my mom, even though he was perfectly fine. Whatever wrong my dad ever did in his life, he was forgiven for that. I mean, he would call me during the day and say, let me tell you, there's some crazy people in this place. But he chose to go into a lockdown Alzheimer's facility with my mom just to be with her until she died.
Even what he continues to do to this day, like I'm 47 years old and my dad will drop what he's doing to come over and help me. Like that's just my dad.
Man, he showed up. He was there, like every time. He didn't abandon, he was there, you know, he raised us with the strength to believe in ourselves. You know, there's something that he always told me. He was like, sometimes you got to take one step back to make 10 forward, you know, and I hold on to that, and I'll pass it on to my daughter and any other children in the future.
How have they changed me? Well, I think they've made me a better person, without question.
It continues to change you when you're a father. I'm still learning things. And just looking back, there are different periods where I could say there were like big steps in growth and getting something, understanding something, and realizing I needed to grow. I wanted to grow in certain areas. Definitely not a one-shot deal.
Each kid is different. Learning that was hard for me. You know, I did a lot of mistakes.
You know, you get the book What to Expect when you're expecting, but there aren't any books written on what to expect when they're frigging older and know everything. That edition hasn't come out yet. I'm waiting for it. I might write it myself, but...
I remember going back to Central America, and this was a 6-year-old kid on the floor. And people are just stepping over him And I'm probably 16 years old, and I'm outraged. I'm telling my mom, why is nobody picking this kid up? I think that was also given to me by my parents, opening my eyes to those kind of needs. And I think as parents, I think that's what our jobs are, is to make sure that our kids are tuned. I don't think anybody naturally has that. I think parents have to fine-tune that, make sure that they have that peripheral vision for those kind of things.
Find out what interests them and then be a part of that.
When you get married, you don't have your life and then add a person. No, you're exchanging your single life for your married life. It's a full-on transaction. And then when you have kids, it's the same thing. You don't here's our newlywed life and then let's just add a baby. No, it's a complete transaction of you're giving up your freedom and you're having a child. People act like your life is over when you get married. That's not true. You can have a lot of fun when you're newly married and all that kind of stuff. It's great. Your life is over when you have kids because your life is no longer about you. It's about someone else. Everything about your life changes because you view everything through the lens of there's someone who's depending on me.
For me, the key in why I'm comfortable being a parent now is more the things I learned about myself before we had kids, which were like, relax a little and enjoy life, and not everything needs to be this massive deal or something to stress out over. And now, I mean, obviously there's some downsides to waiting until you're 39 to have kids, but the upsides are, I think, perspective. Like, we're just able to enjoy it. We have a lot of fun.
I do talk to a lot of people that are about to be new dads or are contemplating being a father, and they're scared. Nowadays they're frightened. I was too, but believe it or not, I am a Latino that plan his kids. I plan my kids.
When you have kids, your life just radically changes and your time doesn't become your own. Make it about the little lives that you have now. Make it about your wife. Make it about others. Kind of live in that space. There's just something unleashed in your DNA that is very powerful. And you will forever be changed, and your environment will forever be changed, and you will get back way more than you think.
Fatherhood is not something I'm scared of. It's just not. There's a lot of other things that can trip me out a little bit, but fatherhood isn't one of them. Yeah, so being a father is just the greatest. It's a comeback story. It's like the best thing I could ever do in this planet is be a father.
Simple to be you, simple to be me. Simple to be you, simple to be me. No use pretending, I can guarantee my mind always running, conversations I'm holding seem so real to me. Shouldn't it be simple? Isn't it simple? Shouldn't it be simple? Shouldn't life be glorious? Shouldn't it be to be you, simple to be me. Simple to be you, simple to be me. Ooh, simple to be you.